Hello and welcome to the Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful podcast. In this edition, we're going to be looking at climate change and what local government can do to help on this very critical issue. And to go through this, we have two very qualified people. We're going to be looking particularly at the Belfast City Council area. So don't worry, if you're in other council areas, we will get round each council in Northern Ireland. But this edition, we're going to be focusing on Belfast. And to go through the many things going on in this council area, we have the Green Party councillor for Botanic, Councillor Áine Groogan, you're very welcome. And we also have Alliance Party Councillor Peter McReynolds, who is in the Ormiston DA. So you're both very welcome to the Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go to you first, Peter. You've been in council now for about 3 years or so now. How have you found the debate over climate change over that period in the chat? Have you seen a positive evolution in the debate, or have you seen it kind of stagnate?
It's actually around 4 years now, whenever I was co-opted on the council back in 2017. And I was thinking about this today in advance of this conversation. So whenever I first came on council, it was really only myself, Georgina Milne of the Greens, and my former colleague, Ross Brown. He wasn't in council whenever I was there, but really we were the only real voices, maybe Councillor Nicholl as well, that really spoke about environmental issues. It wasn't really done that much back in 2017. Then I really do think that, and I say this all the time, David Attenborough changed the entire game with Blue Planet, and it really connected and resonated with the public. And since then, and the 2019 local council elections, we've really seen green issues come to the fore. I really think that you're doing yourself and your constituents a disservice if you're against the environmental issues. Obviously, as well, then we had the motion declaring the climate emergency, which the majority of parties supported. The march on Belfast City Hall. So the landscape between 2017 and 2021 is completely different from what it used to be. Environmental issues are really up there. Thankfully.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Áine, what have you seen? Now, you've obviously been there since 2019. You got elected, and the Green Party went from one councillor to now four. How have you seen the debate around those issues from when you first entered the chamber?
Yeah, look, I think exactly as Peter said, I think it's more prevalent now than ever, and I think that's only a positive thing. Like, I have been involved, I suppose, in Northern Irish politics for about 4 or 5 years now. I may have only been elected for the last 2, but even, say, one of my first election campaigns, knocking doors for the Green Party, would have been the Assembly 2017. Now, obviously, that was dominated by a different narrative, but even going from that and, the subsequent general elections until my own council election, there was a real change. We went from talking about more of our social policies and economic policies, and obviously some of the environment, but the one issue in 2019 that people were even coming directly up to us to talk about was the environment. So yeah, we think there's a number of factors around that. You obviously, the David Attenborough effect, Greta Thunberg, really brought it into the popular culture now. You've obviously had the IPCC report as well. I think, global warming is not new. It's, this has been going on 30, 40, 50 years. We've known the science behind it, but to actually get it, I suppose, to hit the hearts and minds of people, it's took, I suppose, that, that red light to come on, the IPCC saying that we have 11 years. Then you've got David Attenborough, really highlighting, the impact it's having on our wildlife and our marine culture and biodiversity, and Greta Thunberg as well, really popularizing that message. You really have seen that come to the fore a lot more. And then I suppose as a council, we have taken, leaps and bounds on, whereas, prior terms, environmental issues, Peter said, would have been, that it wouldn't really had been dominating it. Though I think we have seen, with us introduction into the resilience cities, and with Gráinne Long coming in as the Commissioner for Resilience in Belfast, we really have seen that sea change here. We now have the Climate Commission, and it's really embedded into the structures of council now, with our climate working group, with the community planning process. So it really has, it's went from on the periphery, something we're kind of aware of and not really doing much about till that's, it's the bread and butter of what we do now in council. It's built into everything.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, again, for my sins, I watch council meetings every month, and I've seen, since 2014 when I first started, the environment, anytime the environment came up, it was often about recycling or dogfighting. That was very much, and obviously Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful would be very much aware of that. It's one of the biggest queries that the organisation would get in. And I know as councillors, I'm sure you are aware of dogfighting queries as well. I mean, but last week, I noted there was a big debate on air quality as well, which went on. I've noticed, for example, even the debate around waste collection, for example, has moved from just being about, you've just got that wee box there, you just put your papers and your bottles in there, to more into about food waste and more about circular economies. Peter, I just want to go to you on this. I mean, in terms of the broadening of that, I mean, you were mentioning some of the influences behind that, but as a councillor, do you find that the appetite amongst the public is getting broader for more environmental measures?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I sit on People and Communities committee, which is responsible for waste management and things like that. And I suppose before that sort of public mindset shift, it would have been very much so along the lines of, this is a little bit irksome that I can't get my glass recycling done from my house. I really don't like having to go to the bottle bank. What's going on? And it's really shifted into, well, why are we not recycling glass? This is ludicrous. Why aren't I able to do this easily? It's something that can be restored pretty much to its original form and then reused. This is completely not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. So it's moved really from that, this is a little bit of a bother to me, to why is my council not doing this? This needs to be addressed. So you really have seen people move away from that kind of public service mindset to, well, this is environmentally good. This is good for the environment. This is what I want to see from my council. And really, you're seeing that in the committees.
Okay. And Áine, what have you thought of that? Again, the public demand for measures on these things from the council?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it was something people were actively coming to us about during the last election and since that. And actually, an element of it, I think, that we maybe don't give enough credit to is this was the impact of children and young people. Like the many times when I was out round the doors and talking to people, and it was the children running to the doors going, "Oh, the Green Party," and like making their parents go, "Look, you need to be voting on this. This is something you need to be acting on." And I think that has really brought us on quite a bit. We've seen the youth strikes as well, and we can't underestimate the impact that has had on the public consciousness. And like I said, I've had it from people that you wouldn't even have dreamt of, that they would have been bringing up and those sort of environmental issues with you, and the bread and butter of environmental issues, from your recycling right down to how we move things about the city and how we power the city. That's really coming through with people that you never would have thought of, and they never probably would have dreamt of themselves 10 years ago. It really is, it's coming to the fore, and I think we have felt that as councillors as well. That conversation has changed. It has stepped up a gear. We are trying to, I suppose, future-proof and mainstream it, rather than it to be an add-on. It has to be built into every single decision and every single action that we take as a council.
And Peter, what do you see as, because obviously, like when you're looking at climate change, I mean, it's very easy to become overwhelmed because it is just such a complex and big issue encompassing so many different parts of it. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing Belfast in particular, and what, and you guys as a council, because obviously it's a big thing to tackle, and what do you see as the big challenges?
Well, I suppose, and this comes back to when I was trying to reflect on just my time as a councillor earlier on today, it's trying to manage the aspirations of the public. So I encountered this after I brought my motion on getting rid of single-use plastics and things like that, and people were really on board with that, and disposable cups and how environmentally damaging they were. But I suppose it wasn't that they were environmentally damaging, it was more so that the infrastructure isn't in place to actually make them recyclable. So we have non-recyclable, recyclable cups at the moment, because I think there's only one or two places in the UK that can actually recycle the blooming things. And I remember talking to Tim Walker, who used to be involved in Belfast City Council, and he met up with a church that had contacted me, who had done the environmentally responsible thing and had gone out and got lots and lots of these compostable cups, went to council and said, "Okay, would you take our compostable cups? We've done what we should be doing." And they just say, "No, we can't take that. The infrastructure isn't there to actually process these. So they're just going to go to landfill." So obviously whenever that's brought to me, I'm pulling my hair out because it's awful. But Tim Walker is able to explain, the mindset of the public has moved so much. We're trying to keep up with you guys. So it's trying to have the resources there to actually cope with and process all the environmental aspirations of the public and actually deliver on what they want to see. And I think that's a major challenge that all councillors are going to experience at some point.
Okay, Áine, well, what do you think about that?
Absolutely, the wheels of change grind slowly. I think we've all learned the hard way about that in council. It's not just as simple. Like, we declared a climate emergency almost 2 years ago now, and it's actually delivering that into action is the hardest thing to do. For me, to be quite honest, I think one of the greatest barriers for Belfast in terms of tackling the climate emergency is how restricted we are by other bodies in government. The devolution of powers here and the split between different institutions that, let's say, maybe are not at the same level as us as a council. We don't have transport powers, we don't have regeneration powers. We're reliant on another government department where it's almost siloed the environment in terms of the assembly level into one department rather than it being embedded, I suppose, throughout departments. And I think that is going to be the biggest challenge. We've done our mini Stern in Belfast. We know what we need to do to decarbonise the city in terms of looking at transport and particularly in terms of retrofitting housing in particular. We don't have the direct powers to do that. So we are, unfortunately, held up by those other institutions. We don't necessarily move. They move probably even slower than council. Some might believe that's possible, but unfortunately it is. And we've seen that even in the last year. We've seen how other cities and other countries have adapted to COVID, and they've been able to deliver, really these groundbreaking, new schemes of like public transport and, cycling infrastructure and pop-up parks. And they've really reimagined their city because of the new priorities that COVID has brought in as well. Whereas what did we get? We got a couple of, cones for a pop-up cycle lane and one parklet. Like, it can be disheartening and can be pretty frustrating for us as councillors because I don't think there's much institutional resistance anymore in council. I think we are all singing up the same hymn sheet there, but it's getting, I suppose, the powers that be even at that level of government above us to actually start moving. And obviously we were constrained by the fact we didn't have an assembly for so long as well, and it was only back up when COVID hit. And the ministers are still trying to get to grips, I suppose, with their departments, which maybe have cultures and institutions there that just aren't really on the same page. And that is going to be a real challenge going forward.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Peter, if you go back to 2018 when the Primark fire hit and we talked about reimagining the city centre and, the chaos that caused by one building going on fire and, the chaos it caused in the city centre, it really brought home a structural weakness in how our city centre was designed. And we talked about pedestrianisation and we talked about all this stuff. Then COVID came along, as Áine says, and we were then talking about it again. And as we're now starting to open back up again, and it looks like the vaccine's going well, seems like our foot has kind of come off the pedal on that a wee bit, and it seems like we may just go back to the way things may have been before. Where do you think we are on that? Are you a bit more optimistic?
I don't know. I feel as I advanced in my years, my optimism slowly leaves my body. But I do remember those times and trying to be ambitious before, and you kind of do just go back to the way things have always been. I remember whenever I was Deputy Lord Mayor, Jonathan Porritt spoke, and I shared a stage with him, and he said, be ambitious, just aim high, and wherever you land, that's fine. But I think sometimes in Northern Irish society, we try to get it right first time and get it perfect, and then move on. So as Áine was just saying there, with DFI, and there's lots of issues in terms of how they approach active travel, but in France, they just went out the next day and started painting left, right, and centre. And there's bikes everywhere and there's green everywhere. Whereas we got a couple of cones and a line painted along Bedford Street. I mean, that's not a cycling revolution. And now we're just going back to the way things were. Whereas I think we really do need to be ambitious and just do the bloody thing. So whenever it comes to, I think in East Belfast with the glider, everybody was up in arms about the glider and the disruption it was going to cause. And it's awful. It's a waste of time, waste of money. And then you get it and you just get over it, and then you move on and you grumble about something else. It's for me, it's the right thing to do. I want a city that is open. I want a city that is easy to use for everybody and connects everybody. And pedestrianisation is a prime example you've just said there. Whenever I put up on social media about pedestrianisation here, what do you think about this? Cause outrage as well. Whereas if you just do it, people adapt and they just move on to the next thing. So I think that we really do need to be ambitious if we're going to change things for the better in Belfast. When it comes to the environment, we just need to look at other cities, look at the best practice, which active travel, pedestrianisation, all those things have been proven to achieve. Let's just do it. If there's an issue, change it back. But I think that usually these things work out for the best. And I think that's what we need to do.
Okay. And obviously, in terms of what the council can do, so obviously I was looking over some of the initiatives in the past few months. So we've obviously got the 1 Million Trees initiative, which was launched about 6 weeks ago. And obviously there have been talk about air quality strategies and so on and so forth. In terms of the council, Áine, I want to go to you. What do you think the next big idea should be for the environment at a council level? Now, obviously, you were caveating things earlier. There are things that you guys don't have control over, and there are things that, I know frustrating for you guys. You've got control over a part of it, but then maybe DFI or DARE would have control over the other bit of it. What do you think could be the next big idea in the council on the environment?
Well, obviously, we have just launched our climate action plan. So, our big ideas are there. We know what we need to do because, yes, some of them, aren't dependent on us. But, we as a council are taking those steps to basically climate-proof us as an organisation. So, they're undertaking that assessment and review now in terms of the energy strategy and, our own buildings and estates. But another one actually that's coming through, and I think it's something that's coming, increasingly more aware that it's an integral part of climate emergency, is around biodiversity. And I know my colleague, Councillor Brian Smith, it's one of his things. You get him talking about this, he could talk all night. And I know Peter's colleagues as well. I know in terms of Michael Long, in terms of bus stops and, putting bees and the flowers on top of the bus stops and things like that. It's something that we've all been driving. Brian brought a motion there last month in terms of supporting the UN 30 by 30 campaign, which is basically trying to return 30% of land and sea to nature by 2030. And I think that is something that we as a council can really drive, starting to look at our urban biodiversity. So there's simple things we can do in terms of, our own estate and our own things, but we can help communities because, like I said, people are more aware than ever. They want to get involved. They want to green their gardens. They want to green their alleyways. All of that. I think we can really transform the city by looking to how we can green it in terms of our own little spaces, no more like concrete jungles, start trying to reimagine that. And I think as a council, we can be a real driver of that in terms of leading by example, by helping communities, bringing them along with us on that. And even through the planning system as well, and making sure that, we are getting the best development possible and making sure that we can, if there's an opportunity to green something that's coming through planning, that we take that opportunity.
Yeah. Peter, what do you think about that? The next big idea is coming through on council.
Well, I think it's one that maybe that's come indirectly. The public are already aware of it. I think that if there's one thing COVID's shown us, it's just how important the environment around us actually is. So, we've got a number of really successful greenways here in Belfast. There's a hell of a lot more potential that we could actually deliver way, way more for the residents of Belfast. The greenway isn't just something that I go for a run on or go for a cycle on, whatever else. It's actually something to get you out of the house, clear your head, and improve your mental health. So I think the public are starting to really resonate between, well, hey, do I want to improve my mental health by walking down a concrete up Norwich Road, or should I just take the greenway, clear my head a little bit, and really return myself and reset myself back to the way my mind should be working? So I think with that, the public are going to start demanding, hopefully, a hell of a lot more in terms of active travel, a hell of a lot more in terms of greenways, and just the environment around them. The public, as Áine was saying there, or Áine was saying there, was saying about alleyways and greening alleyways. I think that, and really connecting with the idea that it's not just what's there, it's just reimagine the immediate environment around you and make it better.
Yeah, and also, going back to what Áine was saying, I remember just before Christmas being over in Áine's neck of the woods, and Ormeau Road was just gridlock full of traffic, and I just remember it was just so bustling. And then you turn and go into the park, and it was so quiet and so peaceful, and it just gets you. And it's the same with the Greenway. I know, obviously, in your neck of the woods too, Peter. For people's mental health, and we've got lots of these parks. But yet we see so little of that in our city centre, Áine. Do you think that is there really the appetite to do that? Because if you look at Belfast City Hall, for example, during the summer, like when the grounds are open, there are loads of people in there who want to use that kind of space.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm a stone's throw from City Hall, and honestly, I hate it in the summertime because I'm just surrounded by buildings. There's nowhere for me to go. Like City Hall is always bung. It's impossible to get in there. There really is a need, but we have an opportunity. Like I said, we do have planning powers. We have a lot of land ourselves in the city centre, and it's about connecting things up a bit better. We do have a lot of parks, but how do we get to them? How do we connect them? And I think that's where, like so 30 by 30 in terms of greening up our urban space, that's, an opportunity to do that and trying to, have more of the parklets, have more of the greenways, and, out of the more traditional idea of a greenway as well, like, why can't we have a greenway running through the city centre? There's absolutely no reason why we can't. Why can't we connect our parks in that way? This city, most cities are built around the private car. We actually went one step worse than that in terms of our city was designed around how to shut it down because it was designed for tanks. That's essentially what it is. That's why we have that gridlock. One car breaks down somewhere in the West Link and the entire city goes to a standstill. So we need to really totally reimagine how we connect ourselves around the city and move more to that, greening up and walking, cycling infrastructure and making it pleasant to walk through. Because at the moment, the city centre isn't pleasant. It's not pleasant to live in. I have no outside space. I'm at least 10-15 minute walk away from a proper green space other than maybe City Hall, which isn't that particularly usable either. So we really do have to do that. And like I said, there is opportunity for the council. It's about being willing to take it, and it's also starting to look outside, I suppose, this economic growth and GDP focused agenda as well. I think there's always that in procurement, you're always intent on getting the best economic value for a piece of land and selling it off to a developer or something like that. If maybe start trying to think a bit more broadly than that in terms of going, look, we have a piece of land, we could sell it off to the highest bidder, or we could transform that into a public park. That's where there is going to be hard decisions to be taken, but I think we're starting to get that consciousness there that that's what we have to do. We don't have an option around that, and to be a sustainable city and a well-connected city, that's what we have to do.
Yeah, and Peter, do you think, in terms of obviously, over in your neck of the woods, there's been a big transformation of, reimagining spaces and re-looking at things. Do you think, obviously people in your DA will have seen the benefit from that. Do you think, again, going back to what Áine was saying, that we can bring that into the city centre?
I think we could. You mentioned earlier on pedestrianisation. That would be a bold statement. But if you look at the best practice, it's all ideas that have been done before. I think about, I lived in Europe for a number of years, and everything's pedestrianised. It's quite normal. People just go to the shops. In Belfast, people are losing their minds about having a pavement cafe or something like that. And in Europe, it's the done thing. It works. There's lots of people there that will maybe grumble or something like that, but they'll just get over it. It's just about reimagining things and saying, look, this works across the world, across Europe. Let's just try it in Belfast and see what happens. If everyone loses their minds, we'll bring it back. But I think people would really like, based on what I was saying there about greenways, people have really connected with that and thinking, God, I won't walk down the Newton Road Road. I'll take the greenway. I feel a lot better after my walk. I feel a lot more refreshed. I think if you look at the city centre and you introduce more pedestrianisation or something like that, people will really begin to connect with that, and they'll realise that the hurdles that they envisaged beforehand really were just that. You just jump over them and continue the race. So I go ahead there. No, I really do just think that all these things that are seen as challenges or obstacles, really are just that, and you just overcome them and you just enjoy the best practice that's being done across the world.
I think there is a culture here as well in terms of, someone shouts the loudest and, sometimes that gets listened to. And like you said, in terms of challenges and hurdles, they are seen as that sometimes instead of, right, how do we overcome them? How do we get them? And you mentioned the glider earlier, like all the problems that was mooted for that, they haven't come to fruition. In fact, it's reached its targets within a couple of months of operating. What they thought in terms of passenger numbers in 3 years, they achieved in 2 months. And, they've been able to quantify, improvements in air quality as a result. Like we've seen it ourselves during the summer, there was plans for pedestrianisation around the Ormer Road on a couple of days. And honestly, some of the kickback from a very small number of people within the area, it was almost like, you know, we were just trying to destroy the road, and we were told some outlandish things that we're trying to bring back the troubles. Like, that's how, I'm not even joking, that was something that was leveled at us for trying to, you know, improve the area for people that lived there and worked there for, I think it was equivalent to 4 or 5 nights. It wasn't like it was permanent pedestrianisation, pardon me. It was just, you know, a little trial period to do it for a couple of nights and a couple of days and see how it happened. But, you know, it was, people will struggle to get that into their mindset. You know, change is difficult, and sometimes you have to try it. If it doesn't work, fair enough, hold your hands up, move on, maybe tinker with it and try to get it right. But, you know, we can't be afraid to try. We've no other option. We have to.
Yeah. And obviously, it was amazing how COVID changed people's attitudes towards outdoor spaces. All of a sudden, you saw pavements being overtaken by cafes and bars and restaurants. You know, all of a sudden, these spaces outside were being overtaken. Just a final thought from the two of you. Peter, I want to ask you, you know, obviously there's 2 years to go, believe it or not. Don't mean to give the two of you palpitations, but you are nearly halfway through your mandates before you're up for re-election. In 2 years' time, by the time you go back to the polls in 2023, what would you be hopeful to go to the people of Ormiston with that you could say you would like to have seen progress on from the council, or a project that would be well underway on the environment?
I suppose I'm hopeful of approaching an election, a local council election in a COVID-free world, and actually engage on the doors the way I'm used to engaging with people on the doors. We haven't done that for a while. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I'm actually looking forward to having those conversations with people, seeing what they want, bringing forward our next local council manifesto and saying, this is what we want to achieve for Belfast. We've got our meeting later in the week to sort of look at our manifesto goals and how we're getting on. And, you know, we've raised a number of the things that we said we would do and what we would fight for, and the Belfast that we would like to see. So hopefully I'll just be able to approach things the way I always have done, and actually start talking to people, which is fundamentally what politics is. And, you know, finding those hurdles that I was talking about there and saying that they really are just that. You jump over them and you move on, but making that as easy and surmountable for people as possible. So that's what I would like to see in 2 years' time. Okay.
Áine, what about you?
I probably have a long list, but I think we, you know, are able to go back and say, look, we've started to change conversations. We've got a climate unit in Belfast City Hall now. Like, that's massive. That's starting to really mainstream things in there. I suppose in terms of certain tangible things, you know, I brought a motion in terms of looking at recycling bins in our parks and open spaces, and we're hoping to get a reporting back on that soon. I think that's something that's massive, and it, you know, it's a real symbolic thing for people as well. And I think that is something I hope we will be able to have some sort of progress on. And other things in terms of, I suppose, just climate proofing a lot of our things. Like, we make a lot of decisions without really thinking them through, you know, use for parks and things like that, and increasing our biodiversity. You know, I think it's just getting that mainstreamed in. And another particular bugbear for me is the likes of the Holy Lands area don't have any recycling facilities. So I think it was the last thing I do as a councillor is to try and get that over the line one way or another, because I think it's shocking, and I get it from residents all the time. Every time a new batch of students even move in, they phone me going, where's my recycling bin? And I have to go, yep, we still don't got those. So I think that's something really tangible for me that I am continuing to yap on about, and you expect to hear me go on about for some time, I would imagine.
Okay, thank you very much, Áine, for that. Peter McReynolds and Áine Groogan, thank you so much for your thoughts today. I really appreciate your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for listening to the Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful podcast. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be reminded of future episodes.